Welcome to Elevating La Cultura podcast, a space where I talk with Latinas who are passionate about what they do and are willing to share that passion with others to change the narrative, especially for the next generation. Each season is centered around different topics, but all with a Latina perspective. Welcome to Season 7. I'm so excited to share these stories and hope they will offer encouragement, wisdom, and be something that you can relate to. So vámonos, and let's get into it. Hola! Today I'm thankful to share a great conversation with my friend Jade. Jade is a Mexican Latina who came out of the fog regarding the adoption industry a few years ago and is a fierce advocate for other fellow transracial adoptees. She's actively working to spread awareness regarding the adoption and foster care industry. Having lived experiences in both worlds makes her the ideal candidate when speaking on issues and raising a voice for current and former foster children and adoptees. Please enjoy our conversation. Hi, I am so excited that we are finally connecting. I met Jade last year, and we have just been in communication through social media, and I'm so thankful that we can chat today. As soon as I met her, I knew that I wanted to share her story, and it's just trying to get our schedules to work out, and today's the day that we get to hear all about what Jade is doing and I'm so excited for my audience to hear because I think it's phenomenal. So why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself?
Okay, so like you were stating, my name is Jade, and I consider myself a quote unquote social advocate for adoption as a transracial adoptee. And for people who aren't aware of what a transracial adoptee is, it's someone who is from another culture or race adopted into another culture or race. So, through the power of social media, I've met a lot of people that are in the same boat as me. I didn't have all of that growing up, so I'm happy that I've been able to connect with people and really open up that world for me and reconnect with my roots and my culture. And I just think it's so important.
So I know that you do a lot of work through social media, but you've also gotten published in big newspapers to talk about what you talk about and advocating for
Yeah,
your
so I
community.
actually had a interview for the Texas Tribune when they were talking about the foster care system and abortion rights when Governor Abbott banned abortions in Texas, and their solution to the problem was just adopt or give your kids up through adoption and foster care. And I really don't think that's the answer. It definitely creates more of a problem that's already happening within the system now. So just to pile more on top of it, I don't know. I felt like I really needed to start using my voice and my lived experience to start talking about the things I went through as a foster child within the Texas foster care system and also as an adoptee.
Yeah, I think this is the perfect time for you to maybe share your story and what brought you to where you're at now.
Oh man. So you want to get all into the nitty gritty, huh? So, like I said, I did grow up in Texas, and I was in the foster care system for quite a while. And I was actually adopted when I was 8 for about 5 years with a adoptive family in Texas, and was taken out of that family and placed back into foster care. So I ended up being adopted twice, which is it's crazy enough world to live in as a foster child and then being adopted, but then to be adopted twice and go back into the system and in the same things over and over again. It definitely, I feel, makes me unique, but gives me that perspective as well to basically, I know what I'm talking about. Like I've lived it, I've been there, been on both sides. So I definitely think it's important that people start advocating for adoptees and foster children, and not just from the perspective of either an adoptive parent.
So I know that we connected on our Latinidad, and I know that I shared my experience with assimilation and how I also was raised in a predominantly white space, and you were just
Mhm.
like, oh my gosh, so was I. And I'm trying to figure out like my Latinidad, and we like talk for like a long time
For an
about,
hour or
yeah,
so or more,
I
for sure.
know. And it's just like so great to have conversations with people you can relate to. And so
Mhm.
I'd love to hear more about like your story growing up in an adoptive family that might not have had a culture that was yours.
Right. So when I grew up in foster care, I was actually in foster care for a few years and I was fluent in Spanish. I only spoke Spanish. So then once, and the foster family that I lived with, the first one was a Mexican family. So I was very fluent. I was very in my culture, but then we bounced around from home to home, and each one after that was a white family, and that slowly over time, my culture and my language, everything got completely erased from me. And then, of course, the adopted families I was with were white as well. So just trying to grow up in that space, but like having that knowledge, knowing that it's part of you, it's there, but you just don't have access to it anymore, was really kind of hard. So like even growing up, like you were saying, growing up in a white space, it's like I'm not white, but I was like always teetering on the fence because in some regards I'm not Mexican enough, but then I'm not white. So it's like where do I try to find myself in this world when even as a kid you're trying to find out who you are, your confidence, your self-esteem, your personality, um, everything that comes with going through puberty and just trying to find yourself in this world, but having that piled on top of it, it really was quite challenging. Yeah. So I completely understood where you were coming from when you're like growing up in white spaces. I was like, yeah, because it's like you want to reconnect with your culture and your roots and stuff, but at the same time, it's like, where do I even start? There's no one here to help me navigate that. And then, um, the parents, my first adoptive family was crap, but my second family was very loving. My mom's very loving, but like, what can she do? Like, she only knew so much. And it's not a lack of trying, it's just a lack of resources, especially back in the day. Now that, with the growth of social media and adoptees and former foster children speaking out and providing these resources, I've met so many great people online that are really advocating for foster parents and adopted parents to really integrate the child's culture within their own. It's not something you should just throw on the back burner because that is part of them. That it's in their blood. It came with them. So it's not something you should just kind of throw away and just. I hate the term when they say love is enough. Like, yes, that's great. You love your children and you want the best for them. Like, I love that. But there's more to it. Like, let's face reality.
So when you did have to transition from care and you were speaking Spanish, and then you went to a home that didn't speak Spanish, how was that transition for you? Did you have the support that you needed during that time?
I didn't. I didn't. No. So it was just either, learn English and be done with it, or that was it. So it's funny when I try to speak Spanish, I of course I sound very Americanized. But people are like, "Oh, you can roll your R so well, and you can do this," and it's like, "Well, yeah. I mean, I used to speak Spanish, but it's just not there anymore." And I actually can read pretty well and understand quite a bit, but I get that nervous thought in the back of my head because people look at me and they expect me to speak a certain way and pronunciate things a certain way, and then when I don't, they're like, "Oh, so you don't really know Spanish." It's like, okay, well, it's not really my fault. I'm trying and I'm here. So it's a double-edged sword trying to walk. Um, I think the biggest thing as far as biases you were talking about is that the majority of the hate, I guess I would say, I don't want to say hate, maybe that's too strong of a word, but judgment I receive is more from the Latin community. They're very hard on the fact that I'm not Mexican enough because I don't speak Spanish. I remember I was dating a guy for a long time, and he was Mexican. His family was straight from Mexico, and he was first generation here. And his family straight out told him that, we don't really think you should be with her because she's not really Mexican. So that definitely definitely gave me pause to think like, oh wow, I don't know if I'll ever really fit in anywhere, because the place I want to be, I guess, accepted by, I'm always constantly trying to meet a standard that I don't know what the standard is, because it's always revolving. Even as an adoptee, or like yourself, or people that grew up in America and trying to reconnect with their relatives back in Mexico or other parts of Latin America, we're we're all different. There's so much diversity within our culture, and I think for myself as a transracial adoptee, I really want to push the idea to other transracial adoptees that there is a place at the table for us, because we're all unique and we're all diverse within this culture. Like there's no set standard for what you should be in that culture. And I think it's important for people to realize that.
I've noticed this conversation of how people think you should act or should speak or should look.
Mm-hmm.
And I am kind of happy that people are starting to speak out against it. Like there's
Mm-hmm.
been a lot of judgment if you don't speak Spanish, or if you don't speak Spanish correctly. And there's like this tension between generations, the generation um, of like our abuelos or our parents who immigrated and sacrificed a lot, and then they see their kids are not speaking Spanish as much as they did, or they're losing the culture, losing the language, and not
Mm-hmm.
really taking into consideration that like living in the US is so complex, especially if you're in predominantly white spaces,
Right.
and especially if you're not around family that is like emulating the quote unquote traditional way to do things. So I grew up in the suburbs, predominantly white suburbs, and I only like got to hang out with family in the summers or when we would go to Mexico. And I feel like I hear stories of like, oh, well, your whole family is coming over and you're growing up with your primos and your primas, and like that wasn't my story, but having to experience a reality of like this is how it should be, or this is how it was portrayed in media, and I'm different, and where do I fit in? I think you mentioned like in your formative years, when you're preteen, teen, even through high school and college, you're trying to figure out how you're going to be in the world, how you're going
Mm-hmm.
to navigate the world. And we have so many messages and expectations from our parents and grandparents and other family members, as well as society. And not just society, but like American corporate society, and also like our Latina society, like Mexican have this idea of how you should be and how you should like grow up or raise your kids. And I'm sure it's a similar for other Latina cultures. And so it's really a complex identity for people that are our age and trying to navigate um, how to show up like that is authentically us, being born here in the US, but having roots that we know are not in the US. And I always talk about the historical complexity, because all of this idea and all of these pressures come from a colonized mindset that we
Mm-hmm.
didn't even know that we were being subjected to, you know? And
Right.
so a lot of like the work that we need to do is looking back to like historical context. And I'm sure that like we think like, oh, well, now I'm an adult and I can do like this and I'm healing and I'm going through the journey of trying to reclaim my culture or just like acknowledge that part of me now so that I can pass that on to my kids. At least that's how it is for me. Um, but we're also growing up with the reality that things are not changing and that we're still having to like navigate the same issues. And we see, like, even with the crisis at the border and all of these
Mhm.
political issues, like, that we should be like already like finding solutions for, but we still see such hurt and such ideas that are not changing or not as empathetic as we are seeing the world. I feel like I'm going off on a tangent, but I really want to, and I feel like this is how our conversations are. Like we just get each other going on, like, yes, we need to be talking about this more. But in your journey as an adoptee and now as a parent and an adult, how can we, like our generation, like now that we are adults and parents, like help and bring more awareness to the situations that are still going on, whether that's through foster care or like the child labor that we are hearing in the news right now that we didn't even like, at least I had no idea was going on. How can we be better advocates?
Mm. Hmm. It's a good question. So I think like there's a hashtag on Instagram called Listen to Adoptees, which is basically what it is. Listen to adoptees. You know, you get so much input from foster care agencies, adoption agencies, adoptive parents, of what they're looking for and want this and want that, and how they're raising their kids. But there's never, which I really hate when adoptive parents do that. They share the stories and the daily lives of their adopted children, which I feel like is such an invasion of their privacy, but that's a whole other subject. But I really feel like it's important for adoptees to speak out on their experiences because we're the ones that lived through it. Like, yes, I can adopt a child, but I don't know what that means if I'm not adopted to be adopted. So they really need to have that mindset and to be open minded that you can't be selfish. You can't be selfish. It's not about you. It's about that child and what you need to do to provide a well rounded home as long on top of a loving home. Because, like I said before, love's not enough. You have to provide more to it. Which reminds me that Colin Kaepernick, he came out with that show on Netflix. Which is completely blowing my mind right now. Black and White. Yeah, I relate a lot to what he went through, and I'm like, oh my god, this guy is really talking about it. And I just found out today he's coming out with a graphic novel, so I'm like excited to get that and to learn more and see how well. But I think that's where it starts. You know, people really going out and listening to people, listening to people's lived experiences, and really trying. That's the bottom line, is to try, not to just throw it by the wayside and just think that, oh, we'll just raise them the way we were raised and it's no big deal, because it is a big deal. Because when that child gets in in reality, in the real world, it's going to be a slap in the face. Like, my parents, like I said, are white, but I was living under this umbrella of quote unquote white privilege. So it wasn't a big deal to me. Like, I was with them, it wasn't an issue. You know, if I went into the store, I was with my parents. It's not really big of an issue. But now I'm adult on my own going to a store. I now experience those microaggressions. I now experience the racism. I now experience the, you know, security checking my receipt and following me through the store. And it was kind of like, what are they doing? But I wasn't prepared for it because I never learned about it within my family, because it wasn't something that they experienced. And that's why I think it's important. You can't erase that child and where they come from and their roots.
Oh, there's a lot of people that I have witnessed and um, in my life, there's a lot of people that want to foster and want to adopt
Mm.
because they want to help a child. They want to be like, and it could be for any reason,
Right.
because they cannot have a child on their own or because they want to just grow their family. And a lot of
Mhm.
times, the people that I've come across have good intention. They want to be able to help. But from what I'm hearing is that there's also a disconnect. They want to
Right.
help, but they're not actually asking the child how they can help.
Mhm.
Or and it's not even on the child to know how they can help, but they're not
Right.
taking that extra step to actually educate themselves and to be in community that is diverse, that is going to be able to pour into that child if that child is from um, a different country, a different place, a different have different cultural roots. Is that correct?
Yeah, I mean, spot on. So I would say like it's like two sides. So if you're gonna, I love that there are people out there that are willing to adopt and willing to foster because there is a need, and sometimes these children they don't have any other way out, or going back to their families isn't an option. So I would say with foster care, if you're getting into it, don't get into it with the mindset that like I said, that it's about you, because it's not. And your number one goal should be reunification for that child with their biological parent or with a biological family member. It should never be the goal to do what you can. I don't want to say that they're keeping the child away from the biological families, because I feel like in their heart of hearts, they feel like they're doing good intentions by protecting that child. Um, but we don't know the reason why they were taken away or what the end result could be. Or, maybe the parent just needed a second chance, or maybe they're financially struggling, and they just needed to get ahead. We don't know what the implications are for why they were taken away. So I feel like when you do get a foster child, your goal should be reunification. You shouldn't go into the mindset of keeping that child away from that family. And that should be really the mindset of all the foster care agencies, not just fostering the child out or adopting them out to the highest bidder, because the adoption industry is a for-profit industry. I mean, we have to talk about it for what it is. And then on the other side of that, with adoptive parents, if you have a child that there is no recourse for them to be returned back to their biological families, um, then you need to keep that open line of communication for that child, regardless of what your feelings are or what you feel is best for the child. Because at the end of the day, if that child wants to go seek out their biological family, they need your support. They need to know that it's okay for them to discover that part of themselves that is so very important, because it is still a part of them, whether you take that away from them or not. I mean, when I turned 18, my family was very encouraging, like, go meet your family, do what you need to do, reconnect with them. And I did end up finding my biological mom and my father and a sister. And my sister's still in my life today. My father, I don't really speak to. And, my mother, unfortunately, she passed away a few years ago, but I did have that chance and that time to be with her and to get to know her. And I see where I get my features from, my mannerisms, the way I do certain things. And it's funny how you don't grow up with these people, but yet you can still have the same traits as them without even realizing it. So it was interesting adventure for me to kind of discover that part of myself, and it definitely helped with my growth and understanding of who I am as a person. So I don't know. I feel like it's both sides for foster care and adoptive parents, but I think the bottom line is just listen to adoptees, and really make sure that you're advocating for that child. Just getting out there and doing the research.
I have learned so much from you in just like our conversations. And I'm so thankful because if it wasn't for you in my life, I would not know any of this, like about the foster care system or adoptees, or even like how your feelings are through the process. So I just want to say that I'm so thankful that you are sharing your story. For people who are like me and have not heard about like from someone who has gone through the foster care system, can you explain or break down like the difference between foster and adopting, and even what I forgot the word that you used, but it was like reuniting or
Rehoming,
rehoming or reunification to like
reunification.
the family, and rehoming. Like, what does all that mean? And you talked about the um, foster care system and like adoption system as being a nonprofit. So I'd love to hear more about what all of this means.
So if you're in foster care, you know you go with a foster family, someone that's willing to take care of you and things like that, but you don't get adopted. So you may stay with that family for a while, you may not. Like there, I was bounced from home to home to home every couple of years, so there was never really a whole lot of stability until I was adopted, and then that's when you're placed with a permanent family, more or less. Um, the thing with being adopted, though, is there's still a lot of work to be done in the foster care system as far as advocacy and CPS and social work and upkeep with the children and things like that. But once you're adopted, um, all that completely goes away. You no longer have a caseworker or advocate working on behalf of the children to ensure safety and their mental health. I don't know. Um, so you see a lot of these stories where children are abused, which is what happened in my case. I was abused the whole time I lived there, and on all different levels, and there was no one there to advocate for me. And then once I was finally taken away, the foster family did, or the adoptive family that I was with, didn't even get in trouble. There was no charges filed against them. It was just basically, if you relinquish your rights to these children to us, to the state, then we will press no charges. So it was just a signature, and we're out the door, um, which is pretty miraculous that can happen. Um, and as far as reunification, like you were stating, that is basically where we want to ensure that the child's number one goal is to be back with their biological parent. So for myself, my mother was not really in the right space to take care of children, and due to poverty and among other things like that. But if you're going to be pro-life, which is another thing, people always want to talk about pro-life. Oh, there's just adoption, there's adoption, there's adoption. You can put them in foster care, not a big deal. If you're going to be pro-life, you need to be pro-life from the birth of the child until they become an adult. So you need to provide those resources to the mother to take care of those children. You need to provide the financial resources, the mental health resources, job seeking opportunities. Everything is so well rounded into taking care of a child that needs to be on the forefront, because you can't just push the idea of just dump them into the foster care system or just adopt them out to somebody else and not thinking of the psychological and the physical impact it will have on a child. And as far as like rehoming, that's where I was talking about earlier, where people adopt children and then realize, hey, this is a lot harder than I thought it was going to be. This is not like raising my own kids, because it's not. These aren't your children. They come with their own set of traumas, their own set of life experiences, also depending on where, how old they were when you adopted them. And so you really need to navigate how you're going to handle that. If you can't handle that, um, mentally, then you're just not in the space to adopt a child. It's as simple as that. And like I said, you cannot be selfish when you adopt a child, because it's not about you. Just like when you have children of your own, it's not really about you anymore. So you see a lot of these influencers on here talking about their adoption journey and raising funds to adopt a child, and then they get a child and realize, oh shit, this is hard, and then just, oh well, we just decided we were going to rehome him. And I can't tell you how many Facebook pages you see advertising a child like it's an animal, 15-year-old boy, this race, this ethnicity, this height, good at sports, good at this, good grades. We just feel like he would be better fit somewhere else. Like it's wild. I follow Carposi on Instagram, and she talks a lot about this stuff. She's on TikTok as well. And she really calls out a lot of these influencers. She definitely has more guts than I do in those regards. But it's interesting. So it's a whole mess of stuff.
I guess I also didn't realize that this whole system was a nonprofit.
Oh well, foster care. I don't really know how that works, but the adoption agency is a for-profit agency. So they do make money. Yes, they do make money off of this. This is why it's so troubling, because a lot of people, adoptees that are speaking out, are relating adoption to modern day human trafficking, because you're just selling and buying children, basically. I mean, if to me, like, okay, I'll see like a family that's trying to raise funds to adopt a child, and their goal is like 30, 40, 50, whatever grand. And people are like, oh, I hope you give them a good home, blah, 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 blah. And they raise that money. But then you have a birth mother who's like, hey, I need assistance with my child. And it's like, well, then you never should have had that child. If the adoptive parent can't afford $30,000, $40,000 to adopt that child, how are we then shaming the birth mother who's seeking a bare minimum just to help her get on her feet to raise her own child? And the first option we want to throw out to them is like, well, just give them up for adoption to somebody else. That's where I feel like the pro-life movement, in my opinion, is extremely wrong. Because if you're gonna help a child, if you're gonna speak on being pro-life, then be pro-life for that child after they're born, and providing resources for them and helping them. So if you ask me, I'm pro-choice, completely pro-choice.
Yeah, I love that you share that part of your thinking, because it's a part that needs to be talked about, and not a lot of people are talking about it. I think a lot of times when people are just so focused on listening to the media, and the media does not always share the whole story. And so I think it is up to us to be proactive in actually learning and seeking out what is actually happening, and being um, intentional about the outlets that we get information from, the people that we follow on social media, and um, actually having conversations that are open and like we are willing to learn, and not just like, if we don't, like me, like I do not have experience with the foster system or like adoption. So I need to come at this conversation with ears to listen so that I can be an advocate and to actually hear what is going to be helpful for people. Um, and so I think like the more that we have these conversations, the more it will bring awareness and actually maybe give like a safe space for more people to share their stories. I think like what you're doing in sharing your story is so powerful. And even like the work that you do is so powerful in educating people, and just speaking up as an adoptee is um, so so helpful for your community, and then also for others to actually understand from your perspective. How has your Latinidad inspired your work. I know that a lot of times that, or like, I know that you've said that it was really hard for you growing up. And I am so warmed by your story that you met your bio parents and were able to connect with them. Um, and so I'm just curious if you've taken any of that and that has inspired your work at all.
Inspired my work, yes, and also my daily life. Like, I try to immerse myself in my culture. My daughter is half Puerto Rican. We live in Puerto Rico because I want her to experience that. I want to experience where her family came from, and having my children learn Spanish and practicing with them and making them learn their Spanish. And they're like, I'm like, it's important. It's important. You may not think so, but it is. Um, and just really doing things through my perspective, because like I said, the Latino, Latina, etc., whatever you want to label it as, is so diverse, and there's so many complexities to our culture. It's not just one thing. I represent that through my work, through the books I create, through the coloring books I make, through the art that I do. And I think it's important because if you have that representation out there, then people are like, oh, there's someone just like me out there.
Yeah, I'd love for you to share more about the books that you have out there.
So I have 2 coloring books that I created. I'm still working on additional more of the series, but it can be mentally draining on top of working and raising my family and my kids, and I'm trying to go back to school right now to finish up my degree. It's a lot. Oh, and I have one on the way. So, but I made this one, my coloring book for Latina girls.
Yes, if you're watching on YouTube, you'll be able to see her coloring books.
Yes, and I created each piece of experiences that I've experienced on my own, of things I grew up with my Latina friends, my daughter, like all of this stuff I've been inspired by, to kind of, and I love that there needs to be more diversity in the world. There needs to be more representation of our culture, of the things that we experience in daily life. So that's why I made this book. And then I also made a coloring book for Black girls as well, because my husband is African American. He is Black, and our future child is going to be mixed as well. So I wanted to create a space for her, and yeah, I'm really proud of this piece.
Yes, they're both so beautiful.
So yeah,
Love it. And you also have journals too,
I
right?
do. I created journals, notebooks. I just came out. I did like a clothing line. So a bunch of fun stuff. It's all in my shop, in the link in my bio on Instagram. But yep, slowly but
You have a
surely.
clothing line?
Yeah, I created some clothes and stuff,
Oh my
some
gosh, I had no idea.
sweaters and bags. What else did I create? Some t-shirts, things like that.
Oh my gosh, that's so exciting. Okay, so where can people find your products and
Okay,
connect with you?
so I'm not super tech savvy. I'm still trying to work everything around. But if you go to my Instagram page, World Thru Jade, if you click the link in my bio, it'll bring all of my coloring books, my store, all of that stuff, so you can see everything that I've created.
Perfect. And of course, I have everything in the show notes for you listeners.
Thank you, I appreciate it. So any feedback that you guys want to give, or comments, or even just sharing it, of course that helps with small business owners getting our name out there. So I appreciate
Yeah.
it.
So, what are your big goals this year?
Ooh. So, well, just like, of course, meeting you and everything that, you've inspired me, and the things that you do. I'm thinking about possibly, getting my podcast off the ground. It's still in the very, very infant stages, but if I could at least get it up and running, so then maybe I could record my first episode, that would be great. Um, I don't really want to speak too soon on what I really want to focus it on, because I'm still trying to get down my specific niche. Is that the word for it?
Yeah.
Niche. Okay. And then, of course, like I said, I applied to school, so I'm trying to start school and get that out of the way, and start working on my blog again. I already have a blog, but I only have a few articles out there.
And for anyone listening, check out those articles because they are really good as far as like learning more about what you speak about.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. And then if I could be a guest speaker for a TV interview, that would be awesome. I already did the
Yes.
newspaper one, so a TV one I think would be pretty cool.
All right. So you're
Dreaming
putting it
big.
out in the world. You're putting it out there, so we're gonna make it happen somehow. Because I think more people need to learn about what you advocate on as far as like the foster care system and the adoptee story. So come on, let's make it happen. Anyone listening who can connect Jade with some TV outlets or some news outlets, let's get it going.
Yeah, that would be great. Thank you.
Awesome. And then finally, what encouragement or advice would you have for the next generation, especially if they are adoptees?
Okay, so for adoptees, I would just say, there's a big world out there. Connect with other adoptees, really advocate for yourself and what you need for your growth. Having those hard conversations with your adoptive parents or your foster families, and really knowing that there's a space for you out there. You just need more assistance. Yeah, I mean, and then for people who want to, I guess, educate themselves, like just start following people on Instagram. Read up on the research. There's so many people. If you guys go to my Instagram page, like there's so many adoptees that I follow on there that are just so good. Few of them that I can think of at the top of my head are, of course, Carposi, and then Black Girl White Family. Her name's Amanda. She's amazing. I love her. She was a Black girl that grew up in a white family, and pretty much what her title says. And she does teach adoptive parents how to really help a child navigate their culture, and to keep that open line of communication going. But there's so many others that I just cannot think of the top of my head that just really advocate for the adoptee and push that message out.
Is there anything that you would like give advice to your kids as they're navigating the world as biracial?
To just be strong in themselves, to just be strong in their identity and what they stand for and what they believe in. I think that's my biggest thing, is just to not succumb to the pressures of trying to fit into this small box of what people think you should be, and really being your authentic self, because at the end of the day, that's when you're going to be the most happiest, is by being who you are. Whether that be an adopted person like me that doesn't speak Spanish.
When I have conversations with people, a lot of times like the first step is just accepting where you are in your life and accepting that, like for me, like my Spanish isn't perfect. I've lost a lot of it because of how I grew up, and it's just accepting that and then choosing to move forward, whatever that may look like.
Right.
So yeah. Anyway, I am so thankful for your time and your willingness to share your story. This was great, and I hope that the more that we can bring awareness to this conversation, the more we can start shifting these big corporations that need work. And
even just the laws and policies out there. When people start speaking up, we can advocate for change on behalf of adoptees and foster children.
Yes, I think that's an amazing point. That's a great point because it's not until we hear the stories or know people's lived experiences, they will start connecting to why policies need to change or laws need to be different, and we can start working together to advocate for the change that is needed.
Right.
Yeah.
And just remember, you don't have to live that experience to advocate for us.
Ooh, that was powerful. Yes.
Yes.
I love that. And so on that note, on that mic drop, we will end, and I am looking forward to when we get to meet in person again
Yes.
and continue our conversation. So thank you so much, and we will chat later.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
I'm so thankful to bring more awareness to stories like Jade's, especially this month with May being Foster Care Awareness Month. I hope conversations like this one can bring more intentionality, empathy, and safety around adoptees' lived experiences. Okay, amigos. There'll be a new episode every Tuesday, so after you listen, feel free to take a screenshot, post on Instagram, and tag at Elevating La Cultura, or send me a DM. You can also comment on this YouTube video if you're watching online. I always like to hear from people and how they resonate with the stories that I share. And if you haven't yet, please join the Elevating La Cultura Comunidad on Facebook, where we can continue the conversations we have on the podcast. Sometimes I go live spontaneously, so if you're wanting another way to connect with me and go deeper on the episodes and talks we have on the podcast, join the Facebook group. All right, enjoy the rest of your day, afternoon, evening, whenever you're listening, y nos vemos next week. Bye.